Based on media reports and the 8 poster spaces already reserved on the wall, we can safely say that Supermassive Games has already planned out the rest of the Dark Pictures franchise. Likewise, it's well established that they love dropping hints about upcoming games in Easter eggs. In Man of Medan, you can find a book that hints at the plot of Little Hope, as well as a newspaper article mentioning an archaeological expedition disappearing in Iraq, obviously a reference to Game 3 in the series, House of Ashes. That's not their earliest Easter egg, though. Did you know there's a hint about Man of Medan in their VR rail shooter Rush of Blood? It's true! This skeleton from Medan, which inspires Alex to imagine this monster, appears in Rush of Blood's first level, hidden away in a boxcar. This brings us to the hints that could possibly be pointing to the plots of games 4 through 8 in the Dark Pictures Anthology. I've identified a few readable files in Little Hope and Man of Medan that have nothing to do with the plot of the game, and as such, may point to one of the plots of the upcoming games in the series. Let's start with the most obvious one. The article is about an episode investigating the Zodiac Killer, which, as I've previously mentioned, would make a hell of a flashback for opening of a game. But beyond that, Architects of Murder is a great nickname for serial killers as a group, and as some have mentioned, is a perfect description of Herman Mudgett, H.H. Holmes, who is literally the architect of a murder hotel. Could Game 4 be a serial killer game that touches on Holmes' legacy? Let's take a look at the collector's map, which shows off the symbols and locations of the first 4 games in that franchise. As we can see, the symbols are very accurate to where the games are set. The boat representing Man of Medan is just off of Tahiti. The doll representing Little Hope is covering the general area of Andover, Massachusetts, the real-life inspiration for Little Hope. And the crescent moon is on the border between Iran and Iraq. In the mountain range, we know the game to be set in. So what can the compass tell us? The compass is fairly large, with the top going well into Ontario and the tines jutting down into Wisconsin and Michigan. One thing we can say for sure is that it probably won't be set in or around Chicago, since it's at the bottom of Lake Michigan, well below the symbol. They'd be stretching it to show a scene in the murder hotel if that map is accurate. If we guess that we're supposed to focus on the center of the compass, we can figure that the game will be set in Wisconsin, or more likely, the Michigan Peninsula, which by all rights should be part of Wisconsin if you look at it. There's nothing up there but forests and lakes, which obviously makes me think of the Axeman in the Woods from Little Hope's opening credits. On a related note, there's a tiny town called Paradise, right in the area covered by the middle of the compass, and I literally couldn't imagine a better name for a town to ironically set one of these games in. Considering Supermassive's love of using clever place names like Little Hope, maybe it's not too far-fetched to set the game near Paradise. Perhaps the article about Architects of Murder is even more important than we realize, and the game will be about a TV crew going to an isolated location to investigate a famous northern Michigan murder, only to find themselves caught up in the killer's return. Okay, I'll be honest, that prediction is mostly just a reference to the plot of the game Murder House, which I starred in as Gary, the sleazy producer. Oh, and here's something confusing. I found a second map online which has the compass in a slightly different position. It's still not near Chicago, but it's noticeably lower than on the other map. So that's the one with the most evidence. What's next? Check out this newspaper article, Exploring the Urge to Reach Beyond. It's an interview with Alan Childs, the author of a book about Apollo 10, telling the story of what it was like for the people who had to do the test run to make sure that Apollo 11's trip to the moon was possible. The interview specifically addresses the fact that the Apollo 10 astronauts would be tempted to try to land on the moon and set the record, so they purposefully weren't given enough fuel to successfully land and take off again. It's important to note here that Alan Childs isn't a real person, and The Forgotten Apollo isn't a real book. This article was written entirely by the game's developers, just like the one about archaeologists disappearing in Iraq. I think you can see where this might be going. Moon horror! Could they be planning a horror game set on a moon base in the near future? With the flashback sequence being set during the Apollo 10 mission, perhaps the Apollo 10 astronauts did land, found something horrific, and then fled, only for the denizens of a moon base to discover it again 60 years later. If that's the case, does that mean the picture from the opening credits isn't just a couple of creepy ravens, but is in fact a hint that the moon is the setting of an upcoming game? In another newspaper, we can see this article, which is a profile of a speed skater from Northbridge, Massachusetts, who's looking forward to taking part in the upcoming 1972 Winter Games in Japan. There's not a lot of obvious hints here. It's doubtful that Supermassive Games are going to set another game in Massachusetts anytime soon. That being said, northern Michigan is a heck of a logical place to train for the Winter Olympics, and it's possible that the game's characters could be athletes in training, with Supermassive taking a return trip to winter horror set in the woods. Our final possibility comes from Man of Medan, on the very same newspaper in which we can find the Archaeologists in Iraq piece. There's nothing other than the headline, but Worst Gangland Killings of 1947 is certainly a memorable turn of phrase. And given the Compass's proximity to Chicago, we can't completely discount the idea that the aftermath of a mob massacre might well turn up in one of the later games. That's it for the possible hints or clues I've found. Are there any I've missed? If you think you found a clue in one of the games that might be pointing to a future title, please let me know in the comments section below the video. Maybe we can figure out what Supermassive has planned for the future. I've been the Hidden Object Guru, thanks for watching the video, and a special thank you to the channel's Patreons, Marissa and Desire, for all their support. Be sure to like and subscribe for more Dark Pictures content. I'll see you back here for the next thing, but until then, au revoir.